Beneath the ocean waves lies a world full of hidden mysteries, some so astonishing that even scientists are left speechless. From a Japanese World War II vessel discovered 18,000 feet below the surface to a lost continent, here are the 20 most incredible ocean discoveries. Number 20. An iPhone fished out of the ocean after 33 days. When you drop your phone into the ocean, the chances that it will still work fine are slim unless you have a waterproof phone. Then again, such technology isn't entirely waterproof. Phones with the highest IP ratings, for instance, can only be submerged for a certain amount of time before the technology inside gets destroyed. So, when local diver and retired scientist Dr. Carl Brookins discovered an iPhone 14 while diving in Hawaii, he was pleasantly surprised when it turned on. Despite looking like it had been submerged for a long time, covered in crust, and lying beside a pair of sunglasses, the phone seemed beyond repair. However, after a week in a bag of rice, the phone powered on, showing the date it was lost, December 21st. Despite being submerged for over a month, the iPhone was fully functional. It turned out that its owner, Zach Sigalo, lost his phone while filming Air Force planes overhead, and a wave capsized his kayak. Thanks to Dr. Brookins' discovery and some quick thinking, Zach got his phone back, and even the video he was recording before the mishap was still intact. Water resistance on iPhones has come a long way since its introduction. But what makes this discovery so surprising is that most modern phones aren't entirely waterproof. Water resistance doesn't mean something is waterproof. Specifically, iPhones from the iPhone 12 to the iPhone 14 series boast an IP68 rating under the international standard IEC 60529. This means these devices can survive in up to 20 feet of water for up to 30 minutes. But again, water resistance does not mean waterproofing. This rating covers accidental exposure to water, like spills or brief submersion, but it doesn't make the phone invulnerable to water damage. So, while you might have heard incredible stories of iPhones surviving long-term underwater stints, like Zach Sigalo's iPhone that worked after 33 days at the bottom of the ocean, these are exceptions rather than the rule. The next time you're tempted to use your phone to film underwater, trust me, you're better off not taking the risk. Number 19. The lost continent of Lemuria. You've heard about Atlantis, but have you ever heard about the lost continent of Lemuria? In the 19th century, British zoologist Philip Sclater proposed the existence of this mythical island. He claimed that this continent would explain the distribution of lemurs across Madagascar, India, and Africa. The idea was that a vast continent once connected these regions before sinking into the ocean. Scientists, of course, quickly dismissed this claim. For decades, the lost continent of Lemuria was nothing but a myth. That is, until scientists found signs. In 2013, geologists discovered evidence of a sunken landmass under the island of Mauritius. Coincidentally, the place where this landmass was found is the same place where Sclater believed Lemuria would be. Today, this landmass is known as Mauritius. It contained ancient zircon crystals dating back 3 billion years, far older than the island itself, which emerged only 2 million years ago. This means that this landmass was part of the land that once existed between India and Madagascar and sank into the ocean about 84 million years ago. This means that Sclater was partly correct about his theory. Number 18. Underwater crop circles. Have you heard about Occam's razor? It's an interesting principle that says if you have two competing ideas to explain the same phenomenon, you should prefer the simpler one because the chances are it's the truth. Take, for instance, the story of underwater crop circles. You've seen crop circles on land, patterns created on fields that seem like extraterrestrial creatures made them because of how complicated and intricate they are. There's a similar phenomenon underwater, where scientists find the strangest patterns etched on the ocean floor. For years, divers were baffled by these intricate formations. What or who is creating these patterns? It remained a mystery until 2011, when researchers finally cracked it. It turned out that the truth was quite simple. No aliens or mermaids were involved. Instead, the culprit was a male pufferfish trying to look for love. These little artists used their fins to carve perfect radial patterns on the sandy seabed. The ridges and valleys they create serve a practical purpose too, channeling fine sediment to the center where the female will eventually lay her eggs. The male pufferfish even adds decorative touches, like shell fragments, to make his circle more attractive. It takes the male around 7 to 9 days of continuous work to complete the structure, all in hopes of impressing a potential mate. Once the female inspects the circle and decides she's satisfied, she lays her eggs in the center, leaving the male to guard them for about a week. Who knew pufferfish are so cute? Number 17. An 11-year-old in the middle of the sea. On November 12, 1961, Bluebell, a 60-foot twin-masted sailing ketch, set out on a week-long family cruise from the Florida Keys to the Bahamas. Arthur Duperrault, a successful contact lens optometrist, manned the sailboat. After all, the journey wasn't new to him, and he'd already sailed from the Florida Keys to the Bahamas during his World War II service. Unfortunately, a tragedy broke out on the sailboat. Along with Arthur was his family, his wife, 38-year-old Jean, and their 3 children, Brian, Terry Jo, and Renee. The family spent a good week on the yacht, but everything changed when Arthur hired a well-known local yachtsman, 44-year-old Julian Harvey, with whom he was already acquainted, to be a skipper. One night, while sailing in the ocean, Harvey claimed the lives of everyone on board. He left Terry Jo alone on the sinking boat, hoping that the waves would claim her life. Unfortunately for him, this didn't happen. Alone on the sinking vessel, Terry Jo found herself fighting for survival. She managed to launch a small cork float and drifted for nearly 4 days without food, water, or any protection from the scorching sun. Despite her exhaustion, she endured temperatures of over 85 degrees Fahrenheit, severe sunburn, dehydration, and hallucinations. Salvation came to the young girl when Greek freighter Captain Nicholas Spatidis saw her floating on the waters of the Northwest Providence Channel. One of the crew immediately took a photo of the young girl. All of them had one question in mind. How did this young girl find her way to the middle of the ocean all alone? It wasn't until Terry Jo was rescued that the truth was revealed. To this day, her story remains one of the most heart-wrenching tales in the ocean. Number 16. A crumbling nuclear dome deep in the Pacific. Beneath the stunning blue waters of the Pacific Ocean, a looming environmental crisis is brewing. Not many people know that in the late 1970s, a dome was constructed on Runit Island in the Marshall Islands. This massive dome, known as the Runit Dome, or as the locals call it, the nuclear coffin, contains the radioactive remnants of Cold War-era nuclear tests. The dome was meant to contain over 3 million cubic feet of radioactive waste, a byproduct of 67 nuclear tests conducted by the United States between 1946 and 1958. The waste includes highly toxic materials like plutonium-239, which has a half-life of 24,100 years. The problem is, no one ever said this dome was meant to last. In recent years, the dome has shown signs of failure, potentially leaking dangerous radioactive sludge into the Pacific. Now, the situation is growing more dire. Rising sea levels are threatening the integrity of the dome. The structure sits only 25 feet above sea level, making it vulnerable to extreme weather, high tides, and storm surges. Cracks have already begun forming in the concrete, increasing concerns that a single major storm could break it apart. While some officials argue the amount of radiation leaking is still relatively small, it doesn't change the fact that this toxic legacy of nuclear testing is a ticking time bomb. The Pacific Islands have long suffered the fallout from these nuclear tests, and the threat posed by the crumbling dome only adds to the enduring scars left by decades of radioactive exposure. The question now is whether global action can step in before nature takes its course. Now it's time for today's topic. A group of Australian tourists on a fishing trip off the coast of Western Australia had an encounter they will never forget. While enjoying the calm waters, they noticed something unusual emerging from the waves. Quickly grabbing a camera, they managed to capture an image of what appears to be a massive, spiked sea creature breaking the surface. The creature's dark, scaly body and red, fin-like protrusions resembled something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Witnesses claim it moved with a deliberate grace, sending ripples across the water. The tourists, initially stunned, described it as being larger than their boat and unlike any marine life they had ever seen. Marine biologists have since analyzed the image, with opinions ranging from a rare deep-sea fish to a previously undiscovered species. Some even speculate it could be a modern-day sea monster or a surviving remnant from prehistoric times. Others, however, argue that it might be an elaborate hoax or a case of mistaken identity. Regardless of the truth, the photo has sparked widespread intrigue and debate. Could there still be undiscovered giants lurking in the depths of our oceans? Or is this yet another mystery that will remain unanswered? Number 15. World War II vessel found 18,000 feet below the ocean. Akagi, meaning Red Castle, was an aircraft carrier for the Imperial Japanese Navy built from 1920 to 1927. This Akagi-class battlecruiser became one of the most important ships during the Second World War. Akagi was sent during the pivotal Battle of Midway in June 1942. She was lost beneath the waves for 81 long years until September 2023, when Akagi's wreck was found an astonishing 18,000 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean. A joint American and Japanese expedition aboard the E/V Nautilus located Akagi. This discovery is now one of the greatest wrecks ever found. Akagi was a centerpiece of Japan's naval power and played a crucial role in early Pacific War operations, including the attack on Pearl Harbor. However, at Midway, U.S. forces, armed with critical intelligence, launched a surprise attack, decimating Japan's carrier fleet. This battle is regarded as a turning point in the Pacific theater as Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers, including Akagi and over 3,000 men. The visual survey conducted in 2023 provided a close look at the wreck, including significant battle damage and debris spread across the seabed. As we continue to research extreme depths in the ocean, we might discover more significant wrecks that were once part of the most pivotal moments of mankind's history. Number 14. Identical sets of 120-million-year-old dinosaur tracks in Africa and South America. Recently, a collaboration between researchers from Southern Methodist University and the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro revealed nearly identical dinosaur tracks on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. But what does this discovery mean? These tracks, more than 260 in total, date back to a time when South America and Africa were still connected as part of the supercontinent Gondwana. These footprints were created and left behind by three-toed theropods and possibly sauropods. These marks provide compelling evidence of dinosaur migration across what was once a narrow land bridge between the two regions. This remarkable discovery spans over 3,700 miles, but in the early Cretaceous period, the continents were only about 600 miles apart. The tracks were made along ancient rivers and lakes, likely serving as a corridor for dinosaurs traveling between the continents before they fully split. The similarities in the tracks' age, shape, and geological context have helped scientists piece together the history of these ancient creatures and their connection to Earth's tectonic shifts. These may be mere marks, but they have helped researchers understand what our world looked like long ago. Number 13. New antibiotic discovered deep in the Arctic Ocean. Deep in the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean, researchers have uncovered a potential solution to one of modern medicine's biggest challenges, antibiotic resistance. What exactly is it, and why is it such a huge dilemma? We developed antibiotics to defeat bacteria. The problem is that these microorganisms are living beings that quickly adapt. When bacteria evolve and adapt, they can become resistant to antibiotics that once destroyed them. This leaves us vulnerable to infections that were once easily treatable, such as tuberculosis, pneumonia, and even routine surgeries becoming life-threatening. The problem stems from the overuse and misuse of antibiotics, both in human medicine and agriculture. Bacteria multiply rapidly, and with every dose of antibiotics, resistant strains are naturally selected and thrive. As fewer new antibiotics are developed, we're racing against time to find solutions. In fact, the World Health Organization warns that if no action is taken, antibiotic resistance could result in 10 million deaths annually by 2050. Solutions include more judicious use of existing antibiotics, developing new treatments, and finding alternative ways to fight infections, such as bacteriophages or targeting bacterial virulence without eliminating the bacteria directly. However, the secret behind this dilemma might be hiding deep in the ocean. During an Arctic expedition, scientists from Finland and Norway discovered promising antibiotic candidates in bacteria collected from the ocean floor. These bacteria, part of a group known as actinobacteria, were found in marine invertebrates and contain compounds that could help combat harmful bacteria, including antibiotic-resistant strains. These microorganisms target bacteria's virulence, reducing the bacteria's ability to cause disease without eliminating them outright. This method significantly lowers the chances of bacteria developing resistance, a major issue with traditional antibiotics. Research is still ongoing, but scientists hope that this will help us address one of the biggest concerns in the field of medicine. Number 12. 500-year-old sea creatures that could extend human life. Greenland sharks are second only to the ocean quahog clam, the longest living animal known to science. Ocean quahog clams can live for over 507 years, but Greenland sharks come a close second, with a life expectancy of up to 400 years. These slow-moving sharks take their sweet time deep beneath the icy waters of the Arctic and North Atlantic. They can grow up to 21 feet long but grow at a languid pace of about 0.4 inches a year, which means they reach maturity only at around 150 years old. The Greenland shark's metabolism is so slow yet efficient that they can avoid the cellular damage that plagues other species over time. That's why scientists believe that this species could solve one of the greatest enemies of mankind, time. These sharks thrive in deep, cold waters where temperatures hover near freezing, which may also help extend their longevity. This means cold environments slow biological processes, which could contribute to their long lives. However, that might not be the only secret. Scientists hope that by observing and studying these creatures, we could discover something that could help us age slower or anything at all that could help improve our bodies, including cardiovascular health. While the research is ongoing, one thing is clear: these ancient creatures may hold the secrets to unlocking longer, healthier lives for humans. Number 11. The astonishing voyage of 28,000 rubber ducks. Did you know that 28,000 ducks once had a voyage in the ocean? Well, I'm not talking about real ducks, but rubber ducks, which worsens the story. In 1992, a cargo ship carrying 28,800 plastic bath toys, rubber ducks, frogs, turtles, and beavers lost its load while sailing through a storm in the Pacific Ocean. These toys were carried by ocean currents for years, washing up on shores thousands of miles away. The first batch was found in Alaska just 10 months after the spill, but that was only the beginning. Over the next few decades, the toys were discovered in places as far-flung as Japan, Hawaii, the Arctic, and even the United Kingdom. Plastic toys in the ocean, of course, are a major problem, but oceanographers took advantage of the situation by using the toys to track how objects would move through ocean currents. Researchers, led by oceanographer Curtis Ebesmeyer, used this real-world data to develop models that predicted where the toys would turn up next. Some toys even became frozen in Arctic ice, traveling slowly across the pole before being released years later. Today, nearly 3 decades later, some of these plastic toys are still washing up on beaches. While it's fun to pick up one of these friendly floaties that have already sailed the waters for decades, this shows how much the incident affected our planet's waters. Number 10. The strange yellow brick road. Ancient Greek philosopher Plato first talked about Atlantis, a legendary lost city. According to Plato, Atlantis was a massive island located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, now known as the modern-day Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis was said to be a powerful and technologically advanced civilization that existed around 9,000 years before his time. Still, it mysteriously sank beneath the waves in a single day and night, forever lost to history. Some believe that Plato was merely describing a mythical place as a metaphor, but others are eager to find Atlantis, thinking that it contains one of the greatest treasures in history. Yet, no matter how hard people search, the island of Atlantis has never been found. One of Atlantis's most renowned pieces of evidence was found below the Pacific Ocean near the Hawaiian Islands. Here, researchers found what they called the Yellow Brick Road. Deep beneath the water is a pathway that eerily looks like it's man-made, like a road straight out of a human city. But the truth turned out to be a little anticlimactic. Instead of being part of Atlantis, like many thought, the Yellow Brick Road turned out to be a formation made up of hyaloclastite rock, a volcanic rock formed when lava erupts in contact with water and shatters into fragments. Over time, repeated heating and cooling of this volcanic material caused it to crack, creating this tile-like pattern. This allegedly man-made path turned out to be nothing but nature's own creation. Number 9. Millions of tires in the ocean. In the 1970s, people dumped 2 million tires into the ocean. Surely nothing would go wrong, right? Needless to say, this idea didn't age well. Known as the Osborne Reef, this project involved dumping around 2 million old tires into the ocean with the hope of creating an artificial reef that would support marine life. The idea seemed like a win-win: dispose of waste and help the environment by building new habitats for fish and coral. However, it didn't turn out that way. The tires were meant to stay in place, but over the years, storms and ocean currents dislodged them. Instead of forming a stable reef, the tires broke free, drifting into natural coral reefs and causing significant damage. This means that instead of helping the local environment, it led to more destruction. Efforts to clean up this mess began in the 2000s, with military divers and environmental organizations removing tens of thousands of tires. However, the cleanup has been slow and expensive. As of recent reports, hundreds of thousands of tires still remain scattered across the ocean floor. Instead of a solution, this project became a decades-long problem instead. Number 8. The Armored Snail from the bottom of the ocean. Deep beneath the Indian Ocean, in one of the most extreme environments on Earth, is the volcano snail. Trust me, it's as cool as it looks. First discovered in 2001, this snail thrives near hydrothermal vents where temperatures soar to 715 degrees Fahrenheit. As if that temperature isn't deadly enough, its habitat is filled with toxic chemicals from the seafloor. The snail endures and thrives in this inhospitable ecosystem. The volcano snail incorporates iron sulfide, such as pyrite and gragite, into its shell and the scales on its foot. This creates an armor tough enough to withstand both the extreme heat of its environment and the attacks of deep-sea predators. In fact, this snail's armor is so metal that it's even magnetic, pun intended. In addition to its impressive defenses, the volcano snail has another unusual adaptation. It doesn't rely on eating traditional food. Instead, it hosts symbiotic bacteria in a large gland, which helps convert chemicals from the vent into energy. Basically speaking, this snail has its own food farm. There's no question that this snail is one of the most incredible creatures in the world's oceans. Number 7. A walking fish. Yes, you're looking at a walking fish. This creature might look like a toy, but it's one of the newest discoveries in the ocean. This bright red fish, found during an ambitious deep-sea expedition, seems more like a plastic toy than a real-life fish. However, we now know this creature as a type of sea toad. This species has adapted most incredibly. Instead of swimming, it uses its fin-like appendages to walk across the ocean floor. I don't know about you, but I must say that this is the most interesting-looking fish I've seen just yet. Number 6. the optical illusion of the sea. Few have witnessed this phenomenon in real life, but if you're one of those who have seen it, you would know just how mind-boggling it is. Fata Morgana, named after the enchantress Morgan Le Fay, is a phenomenon that makes distant objects seem like they're floating. It happens when layers of warm air sit above cooler air, bending light to distort distant objects. Depending on your position and the temperature inversion, a single object like a distant ship can be multiplied into layers, appearing inverted or stretched into impossible shapes. This means that one moment you might be watching a ship sailing in the distance, and the next it's floating up in the air, or at least it looks like it. In reality, you're being tricked by the conditions working together. From polar explorers mistaking distant icebergs for mountains to desert travelers seeing non-existent oases, Fata Morgana has deceived many. In fact, there were even theories that Fata Morgana was one of the reasons why the RMS Titanic met its demise. To this day, this phenomenon remains a fascinating subject for researchers. I'm yet to see this phenomenon in real life, but I sure do hope to see it, preferably when I'm not on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I can only imagine how terrifying it would be to see a floating vessel in the distance. Number 5. The monsters of the abyss. Giant tube worms might be one of the most alien-like creatures living in the abyss. These towering invertebrates can grow over 6 feet tall and live thousands of feet below the ocean surface, where temperatures fluctuate wildly and sunlight never reaches. Unlike most organisms, giant tube worms don't rely on food. After all, they don't have mouths, stomachs, or digestive systems altogether. Instead, they have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that live inside their bodies. These bacteria use chemosynthesis, a process that converts the toxic hydrogen sulfide emitted by the vents into energy to nourish both themselves and the worms. Giant tube worms are also remarkable for their rapid growth, often adding more than 30 inches to their length in a single year, making them some of the fastest-growing marine invertebrates. Their red-tipped gills, which can retract into their white tube-like bodies, are packed with hemoglobin, enabling them to absorb sulfur and oxygen from the surrounding water to sustain the bacteria inside. It's no wonder that, to this day, these creatures remain one of the most astonishing discoveries in the abyss. Number 4. Bizarre chimney-like vents below the Arctic Ocean. Deep beneath the frigid waters of the Arctic Ocean, scientists have uncovered a striking and intense phenomenon: hydrothermal vents spewing superheated fluid at a scorching 572 degrees Fahrenheit. These chimney-like structures, located along the Gackle Ridge near Svalbard, are part of a newly discovered hydrothermal field known as the Jodel Field. Despite the icy surroundings, the heat from these vents is enough to melt solid metal under the right conditions, creating towering formations we call black smokers. While these vents look inhospitable, you'd be surprised to learn that this environment is thriving with life. The fluids these vents release contain methane and carbon dioxide, but they also support life in the pitch-black depths where sunlight never reaches. Unique ecosystems thrive around these vents through chemosynthesis, where organisms convert the vents' mineral-rich fluids into energy. The discovery of this hydrothermal field shows just how little we know about the deep ocean. Who knows what other astonishing discoveries we'll uncover as we go deeper into the sea. Number 3. A cargo ship full of luxury cars. This is like Titanic all over again, except this time the losses are luxury cars. In February 2022, the Felicity Ace, a massive cargo ship carrying around 4,000 luxury cars, including high-end Porsches, Audis, and Lamborghinis, caught fire while crossing the Atlantic. The ship was en route from Germany to the United States when the blaze broke out near the Azores Islands. As the fire quickly spread, all 22 crew members were safely evacuated, but the ship, along with its multi-million-dollar cargo, was left drifting in flames. Well, I just know that car enthusiasts mourned the loss of so many great models. Number 2. 900 bottles of century-old liquor from World War I. In 2014, the Swedish dive team Ocean X discovered the Kyros, a World War I-era ship that sank in 1917 by a German U-boat while carrying luxury spirits from France to Russia. For decades, the ship was assumed lost, but in 1999 it was found over 250 feet below sea level, damaged by fishing trawlers and trawl boards. Despite the vessel's location being known, it was impossible to explore the wreck thoroughly at the time. The ship was lost once again before it was rediscovered in 2014. It wasn't until years later, after its rediscovery, that explorations of the wreck were launched. However, it was all worth the wait. The shipwreck, located 250 feet below the surface, presented numerous challenges due to poor visibility, tangled fishing nets, and depth. After several attempts, the Ocean X team finally brought up 600 bottles of Dartman and Company cognac and 300 bottles of Benedictine liqueur, all of which are considered valuable remnants from World War I. The conditions of the Baltic Sea, particularly its freezing temperatures, have kept these bottles remarkably well preserved. Some of the cognac bottles even still have their original tin seals intact. In fact, many are convinced that the bottles might still be drinkable. Not everyone would dare sample these century-old spirits, but for enthusiasts, these bottles are probably worth the risk. Salvaging such a treasure after over a century on the seafloor is a guaranteed way to earn money. After all, just a single bottle of this liquor could fetch quite the price, with individual bottles potentially valued in the tens of thousands of dollars. Not bad for a ship that's been sitting on the ocean floor for over 100 years. Number 1. Testing the limits. Man lives underwater for 100 days to see how it affects his body and mind. Do you think you could live deep beneath the ocean for 100 days? If you ask me, my answer would be a hard no. Humans are naturally curious creatures, so of course, one of us has already tried to test the limits of mankind. On March 1, 2023, Dr. Joseph Dituri, also known as Dr. Deep Sea, began an experiment, one of the most extreme in recent history. He began living in Jules Undersea Lodge in Key Largo, Florida, a submerged research habitat for divers. His goal? To break the record for the longest time spent underwater. He achieved his goal, but he claimed it was never about beating the longest record of 73 days. Rather, Dr. Deep Sea claimed he was curious about human tolerance for isolated, confined, and extreme environments. At a depth of 30 feet, the pressure is about 1.6 times that at the surface, meaning Dituri's body was constantly adjusting to the effects of being underwater. Each day, Dituri conducted daily tests on himself, tracking everything from blood pressure to cognitive function and even sleep patterns. One of the oddest things he noticed was that he surprisingly slept better underwater, and his inflammatory markers dropped. The most astonishing thing is that his cholesterol also plummeted. However, whether these effects are directly related to staying underwater for an extended period hasn't been studied yet. Who knows? Isolation deep underwater might become a new treatment in the near future. The ocean is full of fascinating discoveries, and there's always something new to uncover. If you know of other exciting finds, feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to check out what's popping up on your screen right now.